Welcome back to the Morning Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Matt Witt, and we have reached the 18th and final week of the NFL season. It might just be me, but does this feel like the fastest season in recent memory in the NFL? I mean, with one game added, you'd figure that the season would take a little bit longer. Well, maybe it's just because I'm a Vikings fan, and typically going into week 13, we start looking at the NFL draft instead of the playoffs. As of right now, the Minnesota Vikings, NFC North champions, get a home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, and this season seemed to have felt very fast. But here we are, week 18, where the Minnesota Vikings will travel to Chicago, to Soldier Field, to take on the very, very tough 3-13 Chicago Bears. Time has been set. Sunday, 12 o'clock Central Time on Fox. Not as much on the table as we were hoping for the Minnesota Vikings. We were hoping we could still be in number one seed going into this week. However, there is still something going on. According to sources, the Minnesota Vikings will not rest their starters as the number two seed is still in play. With that being said, the number two seed, the Vikings, would have to come up with a victory in this game, and the Arizona Cardinals would either have to tie or come up with a victory over the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the Cardinals, with the injuries that they've had, DeAndre Hopkins has been ruled out against the 49ers, and the way the Niners have been looking, it's very unlikely that the Vikings will actually be able to sneak into the number two seed in the playoffs. Now, with that being said, as the Vikings are playing their starters, what we can look for in this game, Justin Jefferson being healthy in this game 100% with a game of 194 yards or more will break the all-time single-season receiving record. This would be a sigh of relief after last week the Minnesota Vikings star wide receiver Justin Jefferson was shut down by the entire Packers defense. Now, we saw what happened last week. Deactivated the social media, wasn't in a good mood. Going into this week, we're hoping we can channel the loss that we just had into a great performance against a division rival Chicago Bears. For the Bears, as of right now, they are honestly better off losing this game. For the Bears, they're not playing for a whole lot in this game. Now their starting quarterback, Justin Fields, has already been ruled out in this game. That meaning Nathan Peterman will start for them, so they're not playing for a whole lot. Right now, the Chicago Bears are better off losing this game, in my opinion, as this would give them the possibility of coming up with the number one overall draft pick in this upcoming draft. With a loss in this game and a Houston Texans victory, the Bears will have secured the number one overall draft pick. For this, weather in this game is expected to be 30s and low winds. Great for the Minnesota Vikings, as we love to pass the ball. Going on to our Minnesota Vikings injury report, not great. Again, Minnesota Vikings injury report continues to stack injuries as the season goes on, as this is obviously how it typically goes. But unfortunately, we are losing some of our star players, some of our core players on our team, with Austin Schlottmann and Brian O'Neill being placed on IR and out for the entire playoffs. Now, if the Vikings do sneak their way into the Super Bowl, we could expect to see Brian O'Neill step up and start in the Super Bowl matchup if we end up making it there. As of right now, we will see Oli Udoh start at right tackle, and we will see our new center, who we just signed, start at center. Sucks to see, because those are two positions that are huge for the Minnesota Vikings, as our offensive line, even when completely healthy, is not all that great. On to the other injuries. Garrett Bradbury still doubtful to play, will not play in this matchup. We will not have Garrett Bradbury, but hopefully, I'm praying that he is a healthy scratch for the playoffs, as I've never thought I'd be saying this, but I'm very excited to see Garrett Bradbury come back to play on our offensive line after seeing what Chris Reed has just done and after seeing Schlottmann go down. James Lynch also has been ruled out, one of our core rotational defensive linemen. With that being said, Kairos Tonga and will start at nose tackle for us going forward, as Ross Blacklock also has been suffered with an injury and will not play the remainder of the season. Two players on special teams, Brian Asamoah and Josh Metellus, are also questionable play, both limited participants so far this week. Our center will be Greg Mance, the veteran center who we signed this last week. I'm really hoping this is going to be one of our focuses in this game. We'll see how this offensive line can do, because right now you're playing a Chicago Bears defense that I don't want to say is horrible, but I will say that your offensive line should not look as bad as it did last week or weeks prior when you played some tough defenses such as the Dallas Cowboys. In this game, our focus is going to be how Oli Udoh can look at the right tackle position. Now, Oli Udoh, many of us Vikings fans know him for being a very awful offensive lineman, because he started at us for right guard last year, where he was a penalty machine. Oli Udoh, the Vikings offensive lineman, led the league in penalties last year, which is not what you want to see from an offensive lineman. However, going back to his initial position at right tackle has not looked bad up to this point. Really interested to see what our right tackle and center can do in this game. Onto the Chicago Bears injury report, they have a couple injuries to some core players. Obviously, their star franchise quarterback, Justin Fields, will not play in this game. That meaning we will get to see Nathan Peterman start for them. So the veteran quarterback, Nathan Peterman, will start for the Chicago Bears at quarterback. Now, like us Vikings fans, we have a lot of PTSD when we're playing backup quarterbacks, as this team doesn't have a good track record against backup quarterbacks, but it'd be interesting to see what Peterman can do for them. Also, Trevor Siemian, their backup quarterback, will not play, so Peterman will be their third string quarterback. So this season so far, I mean, Andy Dalton has looked good against us. Skylar Thompson has looked good against us. Let's just hope we don't make Nathan Peterman look good against this defense, but I believe we set our bar of expectations very low for our defense. In addition to this, their starting corner right now, Jalen Jones, is questionable to play with a concussion. Now, we're going to expect that they don't play Jalen Jones, or maybe they do. Who really knows how this concussion is going to look going forward? But still, banged up secondary with the Chicago Bears. Eddie Jackson and Jalen Johnson, two of their best players, maybe their best players in the defensive backs, and both are on IR and will not play in this game. So we'll likely see rookie Kyler Gordon go against Justin Jefferson, which is going to be a sight to see for Vikings fans and hopefully painful for Chicago Bears fans. We could also see Harrison Hand, our Minnesota Vikings familiar face, start for the Chicago Bears secondary. A lot of familiar faces on the Bears. Like we saw last time, Amir Smith-Marset. I mean, not with the Bears anymore for obvious reasons, but still, Amir Smith-Marset was there earlier this season. Their starting right tackle, Riley Reif, played with the Vikings for a long time at left tackle. Armon Watts, who they signed off of waivers when we released Armon Watts, one of their rotational defensive linemen, and Harrison Hand, who we could see start at corner for them. So for this game, like I mentioned, there's not a whole lot on the line, not something that a lot of Vikings fans are going to be super excited for, because we were expecting to hopefully still be in competition for the number one seed as the Philadelphia Eagles lost. Philadelphia Eagles could lose that number one seed to the 49ers or Dallas Cowboys this week. It's going to be interesting to see how this NFC playoff picture looks going into the playoffs, but as of right now, us Vikings fans can expect that we will be the number 3 seed and hosting the New York Giants in the first round of playoffs. That will be a sight to see. Okay, Giants, Vikings fans, I know we beat the Giants this season, but you have to look at that Giants team and be scared, because that is not a team that you want to reckon with. Looking at how the Giants have run the season, they've turned their franchise around the same way the Minnesota Vikings franchise has, where they went from not making the playoffs to hiring a new head coach and completely turning the entire team around. So those two teams facing in the playoffs is more likely than not going to be the case, and it will be an interesting sight to see. As of right now, we can just hope and pray that somehow Arizona Cardinals come up with a miracle and help us get that number 2 seed in the NFC. For this, realistically, although I say there's not a whole lot to look for, there is something very, very big to look for the Minnesota Vikings, and that is Justin Jefferson. As I've talked about many times so far this season, I said how Justin Jefferson is going to be due for a contract extension after the season. Now, he will be due for a contract extension, but the way contracts work, he can also deny that. Now, we could also approve his 5th-year option, but more likely than not, if we do approve his 5th-year option, he'll request a trade. So right now, we are really just looking for Justin Jefferson to want to play in Minnesota, because looking at how Jefferson throughout his first 2 seasons and how he looked last week, the guy is not enjoying himself. He doesn't want to be in the situation that he's at right now. So for the Minnesota Vikings, although he does lead the league in receptions and receiving yards right now, it would be great to see Justin Jefferson go out this year with a bang. And we want Justin Jefferson to be the highest paid receiver in the league, not in any uniform but the Minnesota Vikings. And for that reason, I personally, this is the first time I'm saying this, I'd rather see Justin Jefferson have an incredible day and lose the game than see Jefferson have another bad day and us win the game, because he's our franchise guy, and we need to give this guy a huge contract this offseason. For that reason, the key on offense I have is just feeding Justin Jefferson. I want to see this guy 16 targets in this game. I want Jefferson to please break the all-time single season receiving record. This would mean that he gets 194 yards or more in this game against their rookie corner in Kyler Gordon. This could be the case, or Harrison Hand, whoever decides to go on him. Hand, I'd expect to play more of a nickelback type of role in this game, but regardless, I mean, this is a game that Jefferson can 100% get over 194 receiving yards, and this would be a great sight to see for the Minnesota Vikings, as this would break the single season receiving record set by Calvin Johnson in 2012. That is unfathomable that Calvin Johnson, all respect to Justin Jefferson, Calvin Johnson's season felt unbelievable for the history books. And now what Jefferson is doing this season for the Minnesota Vikings can break the single season receiving record. That is unbelievable. So I'd like to see that happen. We saw Jefferson go against Kyler Gordon earlier this season, and it was great. It was what you wanted to see. And exactly when the best receiver, arguably the best receiver in the league, goes against a rookie corner, he usually has a very good day. We even saw this when he went against Sauce Gardner this season. So it's great to see for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, their secondary is not all that great. Jefferson, he has a contract extension coming up, and we want to see him break the single-season receiving record, as this is what a lot of us can be hopeful for. I mean, a lot Vikings fans were typically split. Do you play your starters or do you rest your starters? This is not a game where you want to get an injury to a player like Justin Jefferson. This is not a game where you want a player to get injured and you can't use them for the playoffs and you throw away your season. Obviously, I get that argument. And the latter is the fact that the number 2 seed is still in play and the Vikings should play their starters. Regardless, all of us want to see Jefferson break the single-season receiving record, which is possible in this game as he's going up against a very lackluster Chicago Bears secondary and a very lackluster Chicago Bears defense as a whole. These are arguably the 2 worst defenses in this matchup, or in the NFL, going head-to-head in this matchup. Key on defense for the Minnesota Vikings, I'm just going to say it, 5-man rush. Okay, there is one thing. If there is one thing the Minnesota Vikings defense has to do in the playoffs, has to be rushing the passer. Because me personally, and I feel like I can speak on behalf of many Minnesota Vikings fans, whether Cameron Dantzler and a Caleb Evans return to this Minnesota Vikings defense in the playoffs or not, I have very low faith in this Vikings secondary in the playoffs. I do. I have not seen enough from this Vikings secondary to where I can say that this defense looks like they can turn things around. But one thing we can fix is being able to apply pressure on the quarterback. And in this game, 5-man rush is a necessity. You are playing against a pocket passing quarterback, third-string quarterback in Nathan Peterman with the Chicago Bears on a very, very horrible, one of the worst offensive lines as a whole in this league right now. So to see Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith not have to worry about the Justin Fields scramble in this game and instead have to just apply pressure on Peterman could be a great sight to see. And hopefully we can see a good day from our offensive or our defensive linemen and pass rushers as a whole in this game. That way we can bring that rhythm into the playoffs. So this is the one thing that I believe the Vikings have to fix on. You 100% can fix this. As for the rest of the defense, you really just have to rely on turnovers. I mean, that's one thing the Vikings, like, turnovers is the only thing that I can say that this Viking secondary will put a smile on my face right now, because our secondary is amongst the worst in the entire NFL. And like Ed Donatel says, yards never won or lost a game. So likely going to have to need a new defensive coordinator this offseason, but he's our guy for right now. Bold prediction of the week, I do have Justin Jefferson breaking the single-season receiving record. I mean, I have to do it. Now, we're not going to do a bold prediction this week. No bold prediction this week because I usually jinx it, and I don't want to jinx this, so 0 bold prediction. I know I already said it, but we're canceling it. Justin Jefferson will not break the record because I don't want to jinx anything, and I really hope Justin Jefferson can be happy going into the playoffs and obviously dominate the playoffs. Final prediction for this game, I have the Vikings absolutely just dominating the Chicago Bears. The Bears not having anything to play for and the Vikings having such a bad taste in their mouth from last week, I believe they will bring that into this game and turn things around completely. Now, the story of the Minnesota Vikings is the fact that we have 11 of our 12 wins have been decided by one score. For that reason, I believe in this game, the Minnesota Vikings will take all of the adversity they've built up throughout the season into the final game of the season and absolutely dominate this game and get their first convincing win this season with a 48-13 victory over the Chicago Bears. Not to say any of our wins weren't convincing. I just mean to say that outside of our week 1 game, every victory has been decided by one score. And I believe this is going to be one of those where you beat up on your opponents, not just your opponents, but the Chicago Bears. I hope you all enjoy the last week of the season. That way we can put our eyes into the playoffs. We have a lot to talk about going forward on this podcast. Minnesota Vikings and NFL related as a whole. Thank you.